Hello and welcome to another episode of the FemiNinja Project, and thank you so much for tuning in. I have another fantastic and fascinating guest with me today with a very important message to share with the listeners. His name is Chris Moore, and his message that needs to be heard is that the current cultural narrative that we reach our peak at age 40 or 50, and it's all downhill from there, is choking the life out of an entire generation. Fortunately, there is a groundswell of seniors who are choosing to age out loud instead of fading quietly into the sunset. He is the author of the book titled Age Out Loud, where he speaks from his life experience working with seniors as a remodeling contractor to show the way to make the rest of your life the best of your life. He is on a mission to change the face of aging by helping people understand the possibilities available to them and that our later years can be the most brilliant years of our lives. He is also the host of the Aging in Place is a Team Sport podcast. Chris, thank you so much for being here and welcome to the show.
Thank you for having me. I'm so happy to be here and to see your marvelous samurai sword collection behind you.
Why, thank you. I really appreciate that. It usually takes people by surprise when they first see it because they don't,
Hmm.
I guess it's unexpected. So it's one of those things. But this is me.
Yeah.
So, Chris, tell the listeners your backstory and how you came to this place in your life that you wanted to help people age out loud. And I'm kind of guessing you and I are from the same generation. And we're kind of like the loud generation, not going to take anything lying down. We're kind of fighting all the norms. And that's just kind of like my summation.
Yeah. So I'm 63. I'll be 64 in July. So on the tail end of the baby boom generation.
Mm-hmm.
And funny thing is that they were the ones that came up with the never trust anyone over 30, and they started turning 80 earlier this year. So it's so interesting because we think about ageism as
Mm-hmm.
the only ism where you're prejudiced against your future self.
Mm. Interesting.
You let that kind of marinate for a moment is that, if we believe that getting older means getting weaker and sicker, then we will self-inflict that belief upon ourselves at some point, assuming we, live a natural life.
Mm-hmm.
And everybody wants to live a long life, but nobody wants to get older.
Mm-hmm.
And so the entire viewpoint about age needs a paradigm shift.
Mm-hmm.
And I'm not the only one who is thinking this way. I write on Substack. There's lots of writers on Substack. There's lots of commentary on LinkedIn. There's lots of commentary everywhere you look of people saying essentially the same thing that I'm not signing up for the getting weaker and sicker agenda.
Mm-hmm.
I'm going to work 40 hours a week for 40 years so I can live on 40% of my income and sit on the porch with my feet up and do nothing with my life.
Mm-hmm.
There's more and more people saying that's crazy town.
Mm-hmm.
And so as people begin to recognize that there's more to life and that the studies I've show that only 20 to 25% of how we age is genetic.
Mm-hmm.
There's definitely a genetic component.
Mm-hmm.
People, we have, DNA, we have genetic information that we were born with, and to date, there's very little we can do about that.
Mm-hmm.
Epigenetics is another matter, which has to do with how those genes are interpreted and acted out in our bodies and in our life.
Hmm.
We can do things about that. We certainly can do things about our mindset and our
Hmm.
diet and our exercise. Primary is mindset.
Hmm.
Becca Levy, who's a professor at Yale, wrote a book called Breaking the Age Code. And in her book, her research shows that simply by having a positive outlook, a positive perspective in your mind of what aging looks like, you will add 7.5 years to your life.
Wow.
And a one of her studies just came out just in the last week that showed and this was over, I think, a 12-year period,
Hmm.
over 10,000 participants in this study, that a large percentage of people from the age of 65 onward actually improve in multiple categories: physical strength, cognitive abilities, learning new things, acquiring new talents. And
Hmm.
that while if you look at the averages, it shows decline. But if
Hmm.
you look at individuals, there are individuals all over the world who are living stronger, living healthier, living more vibrant, more alive,
Hmm.
because they choose not to participate in I'm getting older, so I must be getting weaker and sicker.
Hmm. I
And so,
I want to
go
stir
ahead.
the pot a little bit. I don't want you to
Okay.
lose your thought, but I do want to stir the pot a little bit because it's like, as you were explaining, okay, you're going to work for 40 years, retire on 40% income, blah, 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 just to sit there and wondering what's left in life. Sometimes I think that might even be by design that we're being programmed to think that way. Because if we take charge of our lives and we continue to work and be productive, or we continue to do, things that challenge us physically, mentally, emotionally, that, we wouldn't be that easy to control. And that's a very dark side of my personality coming out, just so you know.
N- No, I 100% agree with you. Call me a conspiracy theorist if you like, but there certainly are powers in this world of ours that would like the mass number of people to be good little cogs in the wheel and do what they're told, and
Hmm.
not ask too many questions. And that's spread out through the educational system, it's through the employment system, it's through the way the world is set up. And it's interesting because we think of 65 years old
Hmm.
as retirement age. And then they've
Hmm.
they've raised that now for Social Security. But my understanding of where 65 years of age came from was that in the 30s, when Social Security was introduced, was in the middle of the Great Depression.
Mm.
And unemployment was very high. And the idea was that we will pick an age after which people will no longer be in the workforce and we will pay them Social Security.
Hmm.
And 65, from what I understand, was relatively arbitrary. It was a couple of years younger than life expectancy at that point.
Wow.
So when Social Security was first instituted, on average, people would retire and draw Social Security for a couple of years and then they would die.
Hmm.
And there were 33 people working for every person drawing Social Security benefits. Now, people live to 80, 90. The portion of the demographic of our society that's the fastest growing segment are those over the age of 85.
Oh, wow. I didn't know that.
Yeah. And there's more and more people living to be 100.
Hmm.
I just read Dick Van Dyke's book. He just turned 100 years old, and he
Hmm.
wrote a book about it. And it was humorous. You can imagine,
Oh,
Dick Van
yes.
Dyke and, being 100 years old. And, he talked quite candidly about some of the things that didn't work as well as they used to, but
Hmm.
how he, was singing in a barbershop quartet where the other three members were all, 40 or 50 years younger than he is. And, but there's a lot of people living longer. So people are
Right.
drawing Social Security for, 20, 30, 35 years. And there are 2.5 people working for every one person that's drawing benefits.
Wow.
So when you hear commentary about, Social Security and Medicare going broke, that I mean, the numbers speak for themselves.
Right.
And i- it's a kind of a political hot potato that nobody really wants to,
Hmm.
touch. You just keep kicking it down the road and let somebody else deal with it.
Yeah.
But, the idea that at the prime of our earning power, right? That at the point of 65, I'll be 64 in July. I feel like I'm just starting to figure life out. I
Hmm.
have decades of experience, a lot of which were learned in the School of Hard Knocks, but I have knowledge and understanding and wisdom that I can apply, and I feel like I have insights and I have gifts that are valuable to people in the
Hmm.
marketplace.
Hmm.
And so to say, okay, well, I'm done. I'm gonna go put my feet up or play golf or,
Hmm.
whatever. I mean, if that's what you want to do, I mean, I'm not
Yeah.
telling anybody what to do or how to retire or not to retire.
Hmm.
I'm just saying before you decide is that really what you want?
Hmm.
I wrote my Substack article I wrote this morning was, dare to dream. What
Hmm.
is there in your life that you always really wanted to do, but you think that ship has sailed? You
Hmm.
think it's too late.
Hmm.
Let's pull that dream back out and reimagine it. Who would I have to become to accomplish that
Hmm.
vision? What would I have to put in place? What would I have to learn? What skills would I have to master? And then maybe, just maybe, that crazy dream
Hmm.
could become a reality. I have an interview in my book. There's a man by the name of Dale Sanders. He
Hmm.
is currently through hiking the Appalachian Trail.
Wow.
He's 90 years old.
Oh,
90 years old. Okay. He will be 91 when he finishes. He started in September of last year.
wow.
He's completed half of it. He started at Harper's Ferry, which is a halfway point southbound. He
Uh-huh.
did all the south leg last fall, and just this week he started northbound from Harper's Ferry heading to Maine. And I had the privilege to meet him and interview him, and he's dancing around. And I hiked with him for 4.5 miles, and he kept saying, "We're going downhill. We can go a little faster." And it's just, that's somebody who decided not to believe the
The
narrative
lie.
of the lie of act your age. Well, this is how I act at this age.
Hmm. Well, and that just drives me crazy because it's like, wait, I remember growing up, and we're pretty small kids or whatever, and just, going to school and stuff, or just starting. And I'd hear that all the time, act your age, act your age. It's like, well, okay, I don't know what that really means. And then as I got on the other side, getting older, and I started pole dancing at the age of 58, people were saying, you need to act your age. And I'm like, I think I am.
Right.
And what,
To right, to say that there's a certain way to act at a given age,
right.
I mean, it's almost like saying there's a certain way to act if you're from Kansas,
Yeah.
or there's a certain way to act if you have black hair, or
Yeah.
there's a certain way to act if you're over 6 feet tall, or there's a certain way to act. I mean, just pick any characteristic,
Hmm.
and all the people that have that characteristic aren't all the same any more than
Right.
all the people that are 63 years old are the same. It's But until you think about it, until you start
Hmm.
diving into that, it's so ingrained
Hmm.
that it's easy to take at face value, especially if you have not had the opportunity to have lots of interactions with people of a different generation than
Hmm.
yourself.
Hmm.
And I think that's one of the dangers of senior living,
Ah,
of
absolutely.
55 plus communities, where
Hmm.
we encourage all the older people to go live over here.
Hmm.
And then all the young families live over here.
Hmm.
And the college students live over there.
Right.
And we have very little interaction with people of different generations, of
Hmm.
different cultures, of
Hmm.
different ethnic backgrounds, of different upbringings. Because I believe that the more diverse the people that we associate with and know,
Hmm.
the broader our perspective is.
Hmm.
I was recently at the International Builder Show in Orlando,
Hmm.
and I was eating lunch. I was sitting at this table, and I was eating my teriyaki chicken with chopsticks. And a young man in his 20s came and asked me, can I sit? Absolutely. And he started eating pizza with his hands. Well, this young man in his 20s was Japanese. And he was at the International Builders Show, and he worked for a company that sold hardware.
Uh-huh.
And we struck up a conversation, and we talked about Japanese culture versus American culture, and
Hmm.
how seniors are viewed, and attitudes towards seniors, and how those are shifting and those are changing. And we had a great conversation. And then at the end of the conversation, he said, "This would never happen in Japan." I said, "What do you mean?" He said that in Japan, people are more reserved. You just don't walk up to
Oh,
somebody
yeah.
you don't know and sit down and have a conversation with them. That's just not culturally done. And so it occurred to me that while I have great respect for the Japanese values in regards to how they treat their seniors,
Hmm.
um, I don't know that I would want to live in a culture where it's not acceptable to walk up and make somebody's acquaintance that
Hmm.
you don't you know and so we all have things to learn from each other. We all have strengths and we all have weaknesses, and where I'm strong, maybe you're weak, and where you're strong, I'm weak, and we can learn from each other,
Hmm.
and we gain from that interaction. And I think the interaction between generations, the multi-generational
Hmm.
living, I call it in my book, I call it the rise and the fall of the Waltons model. The multiple
Right.
generations living under one roof.
Hmm.
And how, when you watch the Waltons, there's always some wisdom passed on.
Hmm.
There was always some understanding and some insight that the older generation has that can benefit, the younger. And in so many ways, we've lost a lot of that.
Hmm.
where there's not nearly as much interaction and just slowing down and sitting on the front porch and having conversations
Hmm.
and really taking the time to hear someone else's perspective.
Hmm.
Um, and I feel like that we have all these time-saving devices,
Hmm.
but we have way less time,
Hmm.
right? I mean,
Hmm.
back before we had all these time-saving devices, that people had time. I mean,
Hmm.
they had time to sit on the porch and watch the sun go down.
Hmm.
And maybe that's part of the attraction of the concept of retirement because, you're go, 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 go all your life. And so you're really looking forward to this. Yeah, just,
Hmm.
just relax. But relaxation without purpose gets hollow very quickly,
Hmm.
you know?
Well, plus we're social creatures. We need each other. We need
We do.
community. We need
Yeah.
to be able to connect with one another, and that's part of what helps keep us young and healthy and vibrant, and continuing through our 60s, 70s, 80s, and beyond is that human connection and that ability to be able to communicate with each other. It's so much better for our mindset. It's so much better for our brain function and our brain health rather
Hmm.
than being isolated or within a small group of people who are the same age or think the same thing and you know don't have any new ideas. I mean, that's when we start to get old.
Right. Well, and if you notice so much of like social media or online dialogue is people talking to people that have the same opinions that they have,
Mm-hmm.
right? And the ability to sit and have a spirited debate with someone who has a different opinion than you about any
Mm-hmm.
subject you
Mm-hmm.
without getting angry.
Mm-hmm.
Right? I mean, we should be able to disagree and say, well, here's what I believe and here's why I believe it. And you say, well, I believe the opposite and here's why I believe that.
Mm-hmm.
And have that dialogue and back and forth and then still be friends
Mm-hmm.
because that's how we grow. Because if I come away from that conversation and you have shown me something I didn't think about, I should be intellectually honest enough to consider that point of view.
Mm-hmm.
And if I'm just as firmly convinced as ever that my position is correct, then I've got some new arguments to add to that.
Mm-hmm.
But everything's so personal these days.
I,
People
once
take
again,
everything.
I'm going to that dark side. Okay. Once again, I think that is also by design because if we're at each
Yeah.
other's throats, and we're not connecting with each other in the way that I remember years ago. I mean, everything's so vitriolic now. If you say the wrong thing, it's almost like the end of the world, and you're almost afraid to speak up and say something because you never know,
Hmm.
who's going to get
Hmm.
upset or who you're going to offend. And so many, I think, wonderful opportunities and ideas get lost because of that. It's like, oh, well, let's not talk about that because, it might offend somebody. So there are ideas that we could be exploring that never actually get brought to the surface.
Yeah. Well, I think it's like the emperor's new clothes.
Mm,
The story about the emperor's new clothes and
yep.
the emperor, has this tailor who charges him, mega bucks for this supposed suit of clothes. And everybody's told that these are the finest clothes in the world.
Hmm.
And, the emperor's walking down the street naked and everybody's, convinced that he's wearing these clothes until this little kid says, "What are you people talking about? It's, he's butt naked." And, you know, and I see that all the time. And it's like, what? Um, anyway,
From the mouth
but
of
it's,
babes.
Yeah, and I love the movie A Bug's Life. One of my favorite quotes from is the from the bug A Bug's Life. The first rule of leadership: everything is your fault.
Ah,
And but how that movie relates to the conversation we're having right now
mm-hmm.
is that in the movie, the ants are controlled by the grasshoppers. The ants work all year long, and then the grasshoppers fly in at harvest time and take all their food and fly off. And there's a point in the movie where the ants suddenly realize there's 100 times more of us than there are of them. Why are we letting them boss us around? If we will simply join together
Mm-hmm.
and act in one accord, we're running you out of town. Don't bother coming back.
Mm-hmm.
And I think that's kind of where we are. And if we're talking about it being by design,
Mm-hmm.
um, the masses are numbed by sporting events and by
Mm-hmm.
the as long as I have my food and drink and my entertainment, and I'm not bothered to look around and see that the level of taxation we're under today is
Mm-hmm.
far more than it was when we revolted against the British Empire
Right.
in the
Right.
1700s, but we're perfectly content to live under it. And um, so,
So I absolutely love that story with the ants and the grasshoppers. I never did see A
yeah.
Bug's Life, but so I love that story because my husband and I actually recently moved from Denver, Colorado, to this small, little, very small, quirky, but vibrant little town in Missouri. And we were the ants doing all the work, and the grasshoppers were taking their more than their cut of, the taxes and everything. I mean, we
Hmm.
couldn't afford
Hmm.
to live there anymore. And not only that, just the crime rate was just skyrocketing. I mean, everything was just blowing up in our faces. I lived there for 47 years in Denver,
Mm.
and I thought I would die there. I would never leave. And it was like, you know what? I'm taking my marbles and going to play elsewhere and taking my tax dollars with me. I mean, it was just
Hmm.
unbearable and unlivable. But it's nice to be
Yeah,
able to have that option.
it is. It is. And how often, and this boy, this perfect segue into Age Out Loud, because we have options. But
Yes.
how often do we not see them? Do we not seize them? Do we not take advantage of them
Mm-hmm.
because it's always been that way?
Right.
We stay with what's oppressive because it's known.
Mm-hmm.
And to step into the unknown requires a commitment. It
Mm-hmm.
requires a certain amount of risk. We don't know if it's going to work out.
Mm-hmm.
But at the point which you just described of, it's too oppressive.
Mm-hmm.
My it reminds me of my dad once said, "There's only so much oppression a free being can tolerate."
Oh, I like that. I like
Uh,
that. And that's,
and he
that's
said that
basically, go ahead.
he said that right after he broke my mother out of the nursing home. He didn't break her out.
Why,
He
yeah,
he
no.
he took her to an appointment to her doctor that was outside the framework
Right.
of their system, and they said, you can't do that. So it's like, well, I'm doing it, and we're not coming back. We're you
Mm-hmm.
know there's only so much oppression a free being can tolerate. But recognizing that I don't think we have any idea on balance of who we are.
Mm-hmm.
We, as human beings, were created by Almighty God as the crown of his creation.
Mm-hmm.
And we were endowed with his spirit. We are created in his likeness.
Mm-hmm.
And as such, we have the ability to create almost anything we can imagine.
Mm-hmm.
If you think about anything that currently exists,
Mm-hmm.
whether it be a light bulb or a rocket ship or a powerful computer smaller than a deck of cards
Mm-hmm.
or you know 100 and some story skyscrapers,
Mm-hmm.
before they existed in the material world, they existed in the imagination
Mm-hmm.
of a human being. And we have the ability to create, to imagine, and to pour our creativity into making the world a better place
Mm-hmm.
if we choose to.
Mm-hmm.
If we have the boldness to imagine something different. Like
Mm-hmm.
you just described, you had lived in Denver all your life and it just got to be
Mm-hmm.
unbearable and you said and I don't know when you left Denver, did you know where you were going? I mean, did you have the end destination in mind, or did you just know you were getting out of where you had been
Mm-hmm.
and you had an imagination in your mind of what you were seeking?
Well, that was a big, like, we have no idea. And we
Uh-huh.
first started looking to leave, to relocate. I think it was like 2000, it was 2021, I think is when we first started. So it was like 4 or 5 years, about 4 years ago.
Hmm.
And
Yeah.
I'm actually originally from Western Pennsylvania. I moved out to Denver right after graduating college with a college roommate. And there's a big story behind that. It was to actually get away from a man who had my entire life planned out for me and didn't ask my permission. And when I was like, this isn't going to work for me, he wasn't taking no for an answer. And I'm like, I think it's time for me to skip town, go someplace different. I'm a skier.
Uh-huh.
Let me go to Colorado and talked one of my girlfriends into coming with me. So that's how I ended up in Colorado. And then my husband moved, he's from Georgia, and he moved to Denver with his fiance 2 years after I moved to Denver. So apparently the fiance thing didn't work out. We met each other, and the rest is history. But when we were starting to get really upset with some of the things that were happening in the city and in the state, and it was like we have to leave. So we started looking at we looked at Rapid City. My husband thought I would really like Rapid City. The
Mhm.
weather didn't sound very appealing, and it was nice. It was nice, but I couldn't imagine ourselves living there. It didn't have that feel for me. And we talked about a couple of other places, even the mountains of North Georgia, because he's from Georgia. And we
Uh-huh.
looked into that a little bit more. And it's like, no, it's a little too isolated. I didn't like what I was seeing there. And when my husband retired, he used to drive out 2 or 3 times a year to this little town. It's called Excelsior Springs, Missouri. He would drive by himself out to this little town to hang out with one of his best friends that he knew from 50 years ago who lives here. So they'd go play pickleball, they'd hang out for a while, and then he'd, come back home. And it was a nice break for me. And finally, when we were looking at different places, finally I looked at him and I said, you go to Excelsior Springs 3 times a year. You have friends there. I don't have anybody there, but we have connections. So we won't be going just out into the cold, knowing no one and nothing. So he brought me here for the first time. It was a year ago, November. And as soon as we got here and we're driving around on the second day, I looked at him and I said, I could live here. And I don't know what it was. There was something that was just so warm and welcoming, which was another thing that was like really weird. People were being nice. And I'm like, why is everybody being so nice? And I'm looking over my shoulder was like, where's my wallet? Where's my purse? Why is everybody being so kind and helpful? And so it's been a heck of an adjustment because it's so different from where, we lived for so long. We actually moved, we bought this house sight unseen. We did it through a FaceTime with a realtor out here. Left our
Hmm.
home in Denver. It took us 6 months to sell it, but you know what? It all worked out.
Hmm.
And,
Hmm.
we're so much happier. It's so much, it's like somebody took a 50-pound weight off of our shoulders because you can move
Yeah.
around a lot more. It's just, the weather isn't great. I will say that, but it's just a completely different, we're recreating our life. I mean, I'll be 70 in September. My husband's going to be 76. So, yeah, this is the next phase.
Yeah. Very cool. I
Yeah,
like it.
it's very exciting.
So the first question you asked me was kind of my background and how I got, and
Yes,
we never quite got around to answering that question. So, um, if it's okay, I'll circle back and
absolutely. Oh,
answer that.
yes. I would love you to.
So I've been in construction for 40 years. My first construction job, 1986, I was sitting in the employment office in Palm Springs, California, looking for, a job, any job.
Hmm.
And a call came in for a carpenter helper.
Hmm.
And, I grew up on a farm. We fixed things and I had shop class in high school. So I said, I'll probably do that. And the guy his name was Karl Hasek. He was Czechoslovakian. He was trained in the old country as a pattern maker. And he um, knew one way to do things, and that was the correct way. And I learned more from
Hmm.
that man in 4 months than most people learn in a lifetime. It was a wonderful foundation. And so went from there, did some work in the tracks in Southern California where it's just a big outdoor assembly line,
Hmm. Hmm.
and came back to Virginia and worked for a truss manufacturing company for 7 years, and then started my company. And
Hmm.
we were building new homes back in the early part of the century, started in '01, and for the first, 6 years or so, things were moving along. People were building like
Yeah.
crazy, and everybody knew at the time that you could build anything and make money on it because housing
Hmm.
prices were just going to continue to go up forever.
Hmm.
Everybody knew that. And of course, that's not what happened. '08 came with a crash, and
Yeah.
all of a sudden there weren't any new houses being built, and I needed a new way to make a living. And about that same time, my mom and dad, who had been living outside of Tucson for 15 years or so, my mom had a stroke, and they moved back to
Hmm.
Virginia to be closer to family and get some help, and bought a house. And my mom came home in a wheelchair to a house that had 5 or 6 steps coming in the front door and 5 or 6 steps going in the back door. And so I built my first wheelchair ramp and
Hmm.
did some other things in their house, make it a little bit easier for her. And it occurred to me there were probably a lot of people who loved their homes, but their homes didn't love them anymore. And
Hmm.
so I began to get educated on aging in place and accessibility improvements and universal design and home modifications, and started doing um, home modifications for people and making their homes more user friendly.
Hmm.
And as I began to do that, I kept running into this attitude that I call, I'm not ready for that yet.
Hmm.
I would often get a call from an adult child of an elderly person and say, mom or dad's really having a hard time, and we need to look at making some changes in the home. And so I'd go over to the home, and then the mom or dad would say, nope. I mean, sometimes they wouldn't even let me in the house. The adult child would call back in tears saying they won't, I was going to pay for it all, but they won't even consider. And I would get this, I'm not ready for that yet.
Mm-hmm.
And people had this attitude that they didn't want to discuss it, they didn't want to think about it, they didn't want to have anything to do with it. And I remember a conversation I had with a elder care attorney, and I brought this up, and he said, "Well, that's easy." He said, what I'd asked him was, "How come people will have a conversation about saving money for retirement,
Mm-hmm.
about putting money in their retirement accounts all day long, especially if there's a free dinner involved, they'll come to that all day. But if you want to talk to them about writing a will, or you want to talk to them about adding a grab bar to their bathroom, they don't want to even have that conversation."
Mm-hmm.
And he said, "Well, that's easy because when they're thinking about saving money, they're thinking about all the fun things they're going to do. They're thinking
Ah.
about going on a cruise. They're thinking about, walking barefoot on the beach. They're thinking
Mm-hmm.
about driving their convertible on a windy mountain road on a sunny day, and all these fun things they're going to do with the money that they are squirreling away. But if they're thinking about writing a will, or they're thinking about putting a grab bar in their bathroom,
Mm-hmm.
they're thinking about being dead, or they're thinking about being sick, or they're thinking
Mm-hmm.
about being incapacitated.
Mm-hmm.
And nobody wants to think about that. And that made a lot of sense. But yet, when people equate aging with being incapacitated, because that's the cultural narrative, and it's so ingrained
Mm-hmm.
that, it's often on a very subconscious level that people believe that,
Mm-hmm.
because it's been so ingrained in them. But then at the same time, I would see people like Dale Sanders, who I mentioned, who's 90 and who's hiking the Appalachian Trail. And, I started doing some research, and there was Grandma Moses, who painted till she was 101. And
Mm-hmm.
and there was all kinds of stories. In my book, there's a guy that ran a marathon at 100 years old. I
Wow.
mean, there's just, you know, and then so what's the difference between those people who don't let age define them,
Mm-hmm.
and all the people who feel like they're got one foot in the grave at 60 years
Mm-hmm.
old?
Mm-hmm.
And it comes down to mindset.
Mm-hmm.
Because if you have the mindset that you're going to get weaker and sicker as you get older, no matter what you do,
Mm-hmm.
you're not going to bother trying to eat well. You're not going to bother trying to exercise. You're not going to bother trying to do anything because you don't think it's going to make a difference.
Mm-hmm.
Whereas if you believe that you have some degree of choice over your health,
Mm-hmm.
and you start making better choices and start developing better habits and having a better lifestyle, then you're going to reap the benefits of those
Mm-hmm.
of those choices and actions. And so that was kind of the beginning of um, the idea for the book.
Mm-hmm.
And then in 2021, I'd been in business for 20 years. It was the first
Mm-hmm.
year we hit $1 million in revenue, and had a very good year
Mm-hmm.
for business.
Mm-hmm.
Um, and then in December of that year, my wife Barbara, we'd been married for 33 years, and
Mm-hmm.
she told me she thought she had pneumonia.
Mm-hmm.
And we didn't really want to go to the hospital because it was in the middle of the, COVID insanity.
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm.
And so we did telehealth, antibiotic, and a steroid, and it didn't help. And we got a stronger one, and it didn't help. And so we finally, in January of 22, uh, we went to the emergency room, and they did a chest X-ray, and she, in fact, did have pneumonia, but more to the point, she had stage 4 lung cancer.
Oh my God.
And so um, my my whole world flipped upside down.
Yeah.
And suddenly I felt like such a hypocrite because for years I'd been telling people, you become a caregiver suddenly. And so
Mm-hmm.
you should prepare your home. You should make your home accessible and you should make these changes. And um, I had that part. I mean, we made some changes to the home to make it easier to get her in. We had a ground floor bedroom and we fixed up and um, but the emotional and the mental
Mm-hmm.
um, challenges of suddenly your world being ripped out from under you.
Mm-hmm.
Um, and then in July of that year, she passed away.
Mm-hmm.
And I went through a period of time where I had no idea what my purpose was.
Mm-hmm.
Um, I'd been a husband for 33 years. I'd been a caregiver for 33 weeks.
Mm-hmm.
My business seemed like it was functioning without me being there to
Mm-hmm.
some degree. My children were grown. I was a ship without a rudder.
Mm-hmm.
And one day I was walking by the river and suddenly a memory hit me. Because when we had first gotten married, we got married in October of 1989.
Mm-hmm.
And just a few months after that, she was diagnosed with encephalitis. And encephalitis is a infection of the lining of the brain.
Mm-hmm.
And West Nile virus, you've
Mm-hmm.
heard of West Nile,
Yeah.
it causes encephalitis. And quite often the brain swells and your skull can't swell. And,
Mm-hmm.
it can be quite often fatal. And she lost her vision. She had seizures. She lost her
Oh.
speech. She didn't know who I was. She told me later, yeah, I knew I liked you, but I couldn't figure out who this guy was that kept coming to my hospital room. And she had three sons from her first marriage, and she knew who they were, and she knew who Jesus was.
Mm-hmm.
And that was all she knew. And she's praying one night and she says, Jesus, if you will let me live, I will teach my boys about you.
Mm-hmm.
And she felt the Holy Spirit come down like a quilt over her
Oh.
bed. But the memory that hit me that day on the river, or the insight that hit me, was that if someone had told me back then, she's not going to die, she's going to live 33 more years,
Mm-hmm.
and you're going to have three more children together, I would have been ecstatic.
Mm-hmm.
And so I realized that I had a choice. I could be angry and bitter and distraught and broken
Mm-hmm.
that she died at 55,
Mm-hmm.
or I could be incredibly grateful for the 33 years
Mm-hmm.
that we had together. And when I realized that was a power that I had to choose my perspective,
Mm-hmm.
it was liberating because that's the same power that all of us have in every moment of every day of our life,
Mm-hmm.
is that we get to choose which aspect of every experience that we go through that we're going to focus on. And it is our response to our experiences far more than the experiences themselves that affect how we're what effect that has on our life.
Mm-hmm.
And I felt like that was something that gave me my life back
Mm-hmm.
because every day I wake up and I choose to focus on what I have to be grateful for
Hmm.
instead of what I have to be upset about.
Hmm.
And that I think is the theme of the book is that
Hold it up higher
gratitude.
so we can see it. Okay. Yes, beautiful. I love
Yeah.
that.
And my daughter designed the cover.
Oh,
My daughter Rebecca.
nice.
Yeah.
Nice.
Um,
So it's okay. It's live out loud or wait,
age,
age out loud.
age out loud.
And what's the subtitle?
How to live a purposeful, fulfilling life in the years that matter most.
Nice. Well, congratulations. When was the book published?
The book came out January the 15th. I was speaking at a conference in Dallas on the 16th, and my goal was to have the book out by the time of my address, and it came out at 7 p.m. the night before. So it was like,
Well,
yeah.
congratulations. So, I mean, that was just this past
Thank you.
January.
Yes, yeah, it's only been not even 3 months.
Yeah. So let me ask you this because you said, you write on Substack and you've got the book. Have you always been a writer, or was this something that just in your this stage of life, that you had the desire or the time and the passion to be able to put something like that together and start writing?
I wrote a monthly column in a local print publication called the Senior News for
Okay.
13 years.
Hmm.
But certainly one column a month is
Uh-huh.
not. I mean, it primed the pump. Let's put it
Right.
that
Okay.
way,
Okay.
right? Um, and I've always enjoyed writing, um, but never saw myself as a writer.
Hmm.
Um, but I think that we all have experiences in life, and everybody's experiences are different. But just like we talked about the story of the ants and the grasshoppers in a kid's movie,
Hmm.
and we can glean some wisdom from that. I think everyday life is full of wisdom and understanding if we will slow down enough to look for it.
Hmm.
And so often the knowledge and the wisdom and the understanding that we have, we discount it because we're familiar with it. It doesn't seem like anything special to us
Hmm.
because it's just who we are.
Hmm.
And it's much easier to see value in other people's story.
Hmm.
We see them and we say, oh, well, wow, that person's impressive, and I could never be like that.
Hmm.
But our story is just as impressive to somebody else who hasn't had the insights or the experience or the understanding that we've had.
Hmm.
And it takes a certain amount of courage to kind of put your story out there
Yes, it
and to
does.
say,
Yes, it does.
right? Because there's always going to be haters, there's always going to be detractors, there's always going to be
Hmm.
people that you're threatening to them because you did something maybe they wish they could do, but they didn't have
Right.
the courage or for whatever reason. But you know, who cares what anybody thinks,
Hmm.
right? I mean, I'm gonna tell my story and I'm going to do what I feel called to do. And if anybody wants to listen, then that's fine. And if it helps somebody, that's marvelous. But
Hmm.
if it doesn't, no one's certainly under any obligation to listen to what I have to say.
Hmm.
And, if it doesn't resonate, then, that's okay too.
Hmm.
But how many people have stories that they keep to themselves? How many people have music that never gets played? How many
Hmm.
people have art that never gets made?
Hmm.
And if I can maybe inspire somebody else to live their dream
Hmm.
by seeing that, I'm kind of stepping out and being a little bit vulnerable and putting, my story on the line because, life can be painful.
Hmm.
And but not everything that feels bad is harmful,
Hmm.
and not everything that feels good is helpful.
Hmm.
Oftentimes, it's not until we look back that we see how we were molded and shaped by the events of our life. And the Bible says, to whom much has been given, much is expected. And I think that we have an obligation
Hmm.
to share the gifts and the understandings and the revelation that we have received, because we never know who it's going to help.
Right.
I remember hearing a story about a guy in the red light district in Sydney, and he felt like God had called him to walk up to people and say, um, if you were to die tonight, do you know where you would end up? And that was all he did. And he did it for like 40 years. And he never felt like it was effective. He never felt like he touched anybody because, people were, coming out of bars, falling down drunk.
Hmm.
And I don't even remember where I heard this story, but then he got sick and he was in the hospital. And some news service picked it up, and he started getting cards and letters from all over the world
Wow.
of people who told him, you said that to me and it just resonated, and I re-examined my life, and here's what I've done since. And I just remember that story, that we do the smallest things that we think are inconsequential, but we don't know whose life we're touching. There was a speaker at the prayer breakfast at the International Builders Show, and he runs a construction company. And he told his story that he felt like he wanted to do something for his faith and for his
Hmm.
God, and he just felt like he should put Bibles out in his showroom. And it's like, well, that's what does that do? But
Hmm.
he did it. And then a few months later, he got a phone call on a Friday afternoon that one of his carpenters had left the company truck in the parking lot and left a suicide note on the seat. And all weekend long, everybody was trying to find this guy, and they couldn't find him. They couldn't find him. They couldn't find him. And finally, the foreman got a phone call from the guy, and he said, "I'm at the Grand Canyon.
Oh my.
I wanted to see the Grand Canyon before I died." And he said, you don't have to do this. He said, "Yeah, I know, I know." I said, "Right when I dropped the truck off, I saw one of his Bibles sitting in the office, and I picked one up, and as I've been out here, I've been reading it, and I've just reimagined my life, and I realize I've made a lot of bad choices, and
Wow.
um, I'm on my way back, and I'll be going back to work, and everything's okay."
Oh, that gave me chills. Oof.
And so we don't know the smallest thing that we do, a smile to someone that we pass on the street, a kind word, to someone who looks like they need it.
Mm-hmm.
The smallest of gestures can have eternal effects.
Mm-hmm.
And we don't realize until we have something traumatic happen in our lives, how important quiet moments and
Mm-hmm.
tiny acts of gratitude and a kind word can mean to people. You know? So I would just say that if you're going through a difficult time, if you're in the valley, don't give up.
Mm-hmm.
Don't stop. Your answer is right at hand. And if you will if you will allow the peace of God to come over you, you will you will find your answer. And the most the most difficult time and season of your life can become the greatest breakthrough and transformation to enable you to be equipped for the next season that's coming.
Mm-hmm. Chris, where can people find you? How could the listeners get a hold of you? Where can they get your book? Just give us some of those links. And I still have a few questions for you then too.
Okay. So my website is
Mhm.
ageoutloudbook.com. And you can go there's a link to get the book. You can pick up the book on Amazon. My Substack is Age Out Loud,
Okay.
and my I'm trying to learn Facebook and LinkedIn and all those things.
Oh, bless your heart. I know.
Yeah, it's well, it's funny because I for years and years I famously said only dumb people need smartphones. And yeah, here I am. So, um, technology can be a challenge,
Hmm.
but it also can be a tool.
Hmm.
It's a way to, and it's obviously the world that we live in,
Hmm.
and so learning to use it to share my messages is my way of creating new neural pathways by learning something completely foreign to me.
Absolutely. You got to keep those
Yeah.
neurons firing and establish new pathways. Absolutely. That's another thing that keeps us going,
Yeah.
especially when the technology is working. When it's not,
Right.
it's an absolute nightmare. And I would, mm, yeah, I miss the rotary phone. I still do. I really do. I
Uh,
miss the rotary phone. When I was, we didn't have to text people. We just walked out to the front porch and yelled down the street, "Hey, Anna, you going to the swimming pool today?" And those were
yeah.
easier times, much simpler.
Yeah. Yeah, they were.
Yes, yes.
But there's no going back. We moving forward.
That's right. And I just want to highlight one of the things that you said. Let me see, the groundswell of seniors who are choosing to age out loud. And I consider myself one of them. And I have had a lot of people on my show who they're part of this. I call it a revolution, that it's just like, we're taking over now. Let
Yeah.
us show you, stand back, whippersnappers. We're going to show you how it's done. Right.
Right. Right.
And then now tell us too
Yeah.
about your podcast. Tell us the title of the podcast and what you talk about on the show.
Okay, so the podcast I have is Aging in Place is a team sport.
Hmm.
And aging in place, most people know what it is, but it's just the idea that we would live where we choose as we grow older, that we we just because we're 70 or 80 or 90 years old doesn't mean that we don't get to determine, where we're going to live, how we're going to live, and but the supports and the network that makes that possible. Oftentimes, having a home that's well suited and
Mm-hmm.
accessible,
Mm-hmm.
that's not what we call Peter Pan housing
Mm-hmm.
built for people that never grow old, is what most of us live in. So having an accessible home, having people to help us maybe with some things that we need
Mm-hmm.
help with as we get older. And I call it a team sport because there's a lot of different people that can make that process
Mm-hmm.
easier and simpler and more enjoyable. So I've had occupational therapists and realtors and an auctioneer and financial people. I had this morning, I had two twins that run a calligraphy business, teach people how to create beautiful
Mm-hmm.
calligraphy. I had a woman that does watercolor. I've had healthcare people. I've had people that have created AI assessment tools to measure the ability of your home to
Mm-hmm.
meet your needs, and had a guy who invented a kitchen knife that was ergonomically designed to be easier to use for
Nice.
people maybe who had some manual dexterity
Arthritis, yeah.
issues. Just really um, interesting guests on the podcast. And I'm in the process of developing an Age Out Loud podcast where I hope to have a lot of remarkable people who are doing amazing things at advanced ages to
Mm-hmm.
show all the rest of us that you're only as limited as you believe you are.
Mm-hmm. Absolutely. I love that. I'm gonna have to write that down too. I've been writing a lot of stuff down. So you're you're only I won't be able to read it, but so you're only as
Yeah,
limited as you believe you are.
as you believe you are. And the other one I heard that I like is if you're going to doubt something, doubt your limits.
Ooh, that's a good one too. Wow. Well, Chris, thank you so much for being here today. It's been an honor meeting you and an absolute
Absolutely.
delight to have you on the show and to hear your story and to talk to you.
Well, thank you very much for having me.
It's been a lot of fun and very enlightening.
Well, good.
All righty. And everybody, thank you so much for listening. Oh, please do share this episode with everyone you know. It's full of such wonderful information. And remember, the smallest of gestures can have tremendous effect, and you are only as limited as you believe you are. Do check out Chris's website, check out his podcast, the book. And obviously, he has a lot more to say and a lot more information to share. So check out the his Substack, and all of these links, of course, are on the show notes, and they will be there forever and ever. And so, once again, I'm just going to say this one more time. You're only as limited as you believe you are. So guide your beliefs like a jealous lover, because that can really impact the quality of your life. And that is the way of the FemiNinja.